So, what are some of the rituals that we can benefit from, that we can learn in particular from Native American wisdom and from some of the spiritual ancestors of the past in the feminine tradition? Well, one thing is to ask ourselves the question, where are we in our life cycle? Are we in a spring? Are we in a fall, a winter, summer? Where are we in this cycle? It's good to locate yourself, because with each different part of the cycle, be it the menstrual cycle or just the internal cycle or the life cycle, each one of them has a deep set of practices that can go alongside of them. For example, when a woman was on her moon cycle in the Native American tradition, still it's this way, she would take the first 3 days of her moon cycle and not cook anything, and would often actually have a place to just rest for most of those days. Sounds like a really good idea. Sounds like a great idea, right? And it wasn't just a matter of like letting her rest. It's because a woman, when she's on her moon cycle, was seen to be the most spiritually aware and awake that somebody could possibly be. They weren't even allowed to be in sweat lodges with men because it was going to be too much for the man to handle. That such was the spiritual energy. And because of that, they weren't going to touch food either. They weren't going to prepare the food because it's almost like it would be too much for somebody to take all that in. Right? It's the time where they were able to look into the face of Grandmother Moon and hear a word of message for their tribe. And what I find is really quite powerful about that is when you marry that with modern science, most people, when they think of like being on their period or even past their period, they think of that time as very unstabilizing. Actually, that's the PMS section, but like when you're on your period, the first 3 days, the hormones are so imbalanced that the two hemispheres of the brain are best in communication with themselves other than any other time in a woman's period. Isn't that incredible? In the entire rest of the month, your brain is most in sync with each other. So what they tell us then in spiritual practices, when you feel like you're in, let's say, a winter of your life, because a woman's menstruation cycle is seen as a winter when she starts her period, you're actually probably at your most clearest, your most wisest. It's probably the time to sit and take time out of your normal busy schedule, even if it's like for a few hours, and get real clarity about what the Spirit is asking for you in your life. So in this moment, in a spiritual winter, let's say, a winter of your life, it's good to sit down, meditate, and I highly recommend, I don't want to say make a vision board, but capture almost an icon of what it is that you're seeing in your prayer life. This is especially true if you've been attentive to the other part of your month, let's say, or creative cycle or whatever, such that you haven't burnt yourself out by the time you get here, right? This time of winter where you're doing deep visioning doesn't just happen when you sit down on your cushion that one time. It's because you've remembered that you're part of a large cycle. And it can happen in a day, it can happen in a month, it can happen in several years. That's why I said it's good for you to find in your own self where you think you are on this particular life cycle. From there, once your winter season is over and you're ready to start back into that springtime, right, that spring feel, what ends up happening is there's typically in the menstrual cycle, but also in this creative cycle, a surge of energy. And what that is in tune to, and what they watch the elders who are no longer menstruating, they still have a surge of energy. We tend to think of this as when we're at our most open and creative, right? You know those moments where you just kind of feel, my brain is open, I have a million ideas today, right? You're in the shower and you can't stop thinking about these things, right? A very good spiritual practice that they will tend to recommend during this time is a balance of good, strong exercise, but no sugar. They cut out sugar at this time frame because you want to harness the part of yourself that doesn't burn out in that stage, right? So when you're at your most creative, your most springtime-like stage within yourself, you actually have to find very grounding and stabilizing practices, including the foods you eat. I think somebody in the room is practicing Ayurvedic, right? Are you? Yeah. This would be the time where you're like doing your kappa foods, right? You know, like trying to do like good grains to stabilize you so that you don't feel too flighty, if it were, in a way. And sugar can almost make you go too fast, too far, and you'll burn yourself out for the rest of your creative cycle. Anybody ever have that happen to them where they're like, I just have so many ideas, I gotta get them all down, and then you get them all down, and then you're like, I'm done. I have no energy left to actually do these things. So there's a balance of moderation that goes into this. If you're going to have, one way to do this then is to have your creative endeavors, but then to have a more physical practice to go alongside of it. Most people will find this part of their creative cycle, menstrual cycle, whatever it is, your springtime, is your hardest time to meditate because your mind is racing so much, right? You tend to be going. So find a practice that will let your body kind of wear itself out. It's great to do more high activity exercise or higher activity yoga at this time. Even just taking a walk every day to make sure you're kind of burning the energy in the body so that when you are meditating, you don't have too much else that's spinning you out, if that makes sense. Has anybody ever felt that in their own life, in their own meditation practices, where there's just some weeks where you're like, not this week? Have you had that happen? Yeah. This might be why. It might be because you haven't had somebody come up alongside you and say, hey, what you really need is good hard exercise and a weighted blanket. It's kind of like that in a moment like this. So the next stage from the springtime then, of course, is our summertime. This is the time, just like they would in their own Native American society, this is the planting time, right? This is where you would not only plant stuff in the spring, but now you might be waiting for some harvest. So a deep spiritual practice that can happen in the springtime is to learn how to enjoy the fruits of your labor. You know, I mentioned the gratitude practice a little bit ago. I am so convinced that gratitude belongs in a creative cycle and a life cycle that I make it a part of my life every single day, but it really bears fruit in this time frame because you're able to step back and say, these are the things that I'm seeing happening that I planted here and that I know is going to happen later on, and to just wait for a little bit for that gratitude to start taking root. How it works in the body is that the gratitude starts to shift, as I mentioned earlier, our hormonal systems, our bodily systems, such that if you plant gratitude in the summer season, you'll be able to harvest it later in the winter season, right? Because it just gets that deep within you. So in the summer season, the spiritual practices, these are the times that you can finish up projects. You still have a little bit of energy from that springtime. If you have things on your to-do list or your conversation list that you need to do, this is the time to have those hard conversations. And it's often when that transition between the spring into the summer, that's the interesting that happens within the thing that happens within the woman's body is that they become more energetic, but also even their eyes get bigger and brighter. It's the time they say to ask for a raise because you're more magnanimous and able to connect with other human beings because those human connection hormones are higher and turned up more in the body. Isn't that fascinating? So all those things can be true within your spiritual practice as well. This is a great time to join with others in spirituality. Maybe go to a church, but also maybe go to a yoga class, maybe go to a friend's house. It's also, though, a time to get really clear about your boundaries. Boundaries as a spiritual practice come in hard here because you're just about to go back to the winter phase and you want to have some energy stored up for that. Women typically are not very good at keeping our boundaries because society has asked us to do everything for everybody all the time. So it's a good time to remember that no is a complete sentence. Summer is the time to speak that sentence a lot. And that brings you back to the deep winter. And once you've had a very enriching spring, summer, and fall, winter won't feel so taxing. It'll actually feel, like I said, that rich, deep spiritual space where new life can be seen because you're in that visioning mindset. Their wisdom here is quite incredible, isn't it? To see how they follow the internal cycles with the external cycles of the year because we're a part of creation. And as I said, it's not just about whether or not you're menstruating, it's about whether or not you can see that in creation and within yourself as part of the creative and life process. So it's a lifelong pattern that women engage in up until the time they pass away, actually. So it's truly not just about one stage in life, but about all of it.